Testing. Okay, can you guys hear me now? Yes, yes. I know there's a problem with the sound. Can you guys hear me now? Okay. 'Cause this thing is always it's a little finicky. For real, Adam, it is the FBI. They hate me, and that's why this happened. Anyways, sorry about that. I'm gonna have to edit that later. Anyways, so yes, welcome here. I forgot my intro music and my outro music. It's you know what? It's Black Friday. I'm a little discombobulated. I ran a 5K yesterday. Okay, I didn't run. I sped walked a 5K with my best friend Grace. And it was great, but I am in so much pain now because I mean, not that you necessarily have to train for a 5K, but I feel like you should at least work up to it, working like walking that fast for that long for that amount of distance. And I did not because I was like, I've run 5Ks before. Why do I need to train to walk a 5K? Well, now I'm in a lot of pain. So there you go. There you go. I know some people use them for like training purposes and I'm just like they're over and done with within like 15 minutes of running a 5K and I'm just like is it that enjoyable if it only takes you like 15 minutes to do it? I don't know. I don't know. Discombobulated for real for real. Um Also I got a new microphone which is why it took a hot minute to figure out the sound because we're testing it out. And for some reason, it was working perfectly fine. And then all of a sudden, it just didn't want to work. But it has to do with my streaming platform, not the microphone itself. My husband's super excited that we got a new microphone because I've been using my Yeti for over four. 4 years, and it was originally the Yeti microphone that I had was a gift from Catholic Connect, which was so sweet of them. But it was something that I needed an upgrade in now that the podcasts are getting a little bit more serious. And, yeah, so we got a new microphone and it is phenomenal and the audio quality is amazing. So overall, 10 out of 10. And then what else was there? Oh yeah, Thanksgiving was great. I hope your guys' Thanksgiving was great. I do have a Black Friday sale running on the donation center. It's 20% off the entire donation center with code Friday20. So make sure that you guys utilize that for anything on my donation center that you guys might want for Christmas gifts later on. And the sale goes until I believe it's midnight on Monday, December 2nd. So you guys have a little while. But just so you guys know, thereligioushippie.com. And under my donation center, that is where you can find all of my limited edition items. So, okay, so we are going to finally, yes, finally get into the topic for today, which is a dating Q&A, a Catholic dating Q&A. So I will be taking questions live from Instagram over here and then on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter over here. So I'll try in my best to go between the two. But there was one specifically that I wanted to kind of kick off with. And that one is from a girl. I'll keep her anonymous just for privacy reasons. But this question specifically, I was like, oh no, we need to address this. And maybe it won't be as in depth or whatever as I would like it to be because I can't dive too deep into this topic because I don't know the specifics. It was a very vague question that came in, but when I heard it, I was like, I can't just answer this on my story. I need to actually talk about this a little bit. So, okay. Oh, also Advent starting on Sunday. So, happy almost Advent, everybody. So excited for that. Okay, so the first question we have, we'll call her A, is that just took me back to like my teenage years and my Pretty Little Liar years, and it just oh, this TV show was absolutely atrocious. But we'll call her A. What to do if you have strong feelings for a seminarian and he still reaches out? So, the first thing I want to say is it depends on how he's reaching out. If he is reaching out as a friend and he is just checking in on you and being like, hey, how are things going? How are you doing? That's not a problem. It's more or less on you, right? Because if he's reaching out romantically, that is going to have to be a conversation that you have with him and describe how inappropriate that is. Because as a seminarian, his whole purpose is to discern this sacred vocation of priesthood or brother or whatever but mainly it's priesthood usually. And this calling requires celibacy It requires total commitment to God and God's church. And romantic or emotional entanglements that he might have with you or anyone else is a contradiction to this vocation, right? So if if he is in seminary, you need to cut it off, right? If he's reaching out to you romantically, I would let one of his superiors know, not out of punishment or like because you think he should get in trouble, but because it's not appropriate for a seminarian to also pursue romantic relationships. Now, you need to cut it off whether you feel for him or not. This is his vocation, and you can't get in between his vocation and God, right? So you have to remove yourself no matter how strong your feelings are for him. And that's going to be really difficult. As women, we are emotional creatures. And so we obviously, when we really love somebody or something, it tugs on our heartstrings and we want to. But um, I think if he's just reaching out as a friend and he doesn't know that you have romantic feelings for him and he's completely innocent in all of this, you need to cut it off. This is your problem. You need to be the one to put your emotions in check and realize that he is discerning to be a priest and it's not appropriate to pursue this relationship. And, um, if later down the line he discerns out of seminary and he decides on his own that that is something that is not right for him and he becomes a layperson, whatever, then you can potentially pursue a relationship. But right now it's completely inappropriate. So you are going to need to step back. And like I said, if he is pursuing a romantic relationship with you by reaching out, you will have to tell one of his superiors because that's, again, inappropriate. Um, I would say you could say something like, I deeply respect your vocation and your journey to the priesthood, but I think it's best that we, take a step back and we stop communicating so that you can focus fully on what God is calling you to. But at the same time, again, you should definitely tell one of his superiors if he is not 100% committed to the priesthood and seminary. I would also say to examine your own emotions because this can kind of trip us up where it's hard for us to get past our emotions, especially these days, to just do the right thing despite what we feel. And that is definitely something that you are going to have to detach from and that you are going to have to practice detachment from. He cannot pursue two vocations at the same time, especially when one of them is not his vocation. One vocation for each person, right? Whether that's religious life, which is what he is pursuing on his own right now, married life, or you know, celibate layperson type of life, right? Those are the three basic ones. And those oh, it's just Griffin, okay. And those three vocations are the ones that you pursue, right? And so your pursuit in marriage completely contradicts his pursuit of the vocation of religious life. So I would examine your own feelings about this and realize that cutting it off is going to honestly be the best thing. Because if he persists and he is romantic, again, I don't have all of the details, right? If he persists, then you need to cut it off. And that can be difficult, but doing the right thing is more important than being caught in this really tricky, weird situation. Honestly, it's a very odd situation. And that is not a relationship you would want to be a part of. That's almost like it's almost kind of like being a homewrecker in a way. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's like being the homewrecker for God, where it's like God is clearly potentially calling him to the priesthood and you're trying to potentially get him out of the priesthood for your own desires, and that's just wrong, right? Again, I don't know you. The question was very vague. I don't know all of the details, so take my advice with a grain of salt. Well, don't. I mean, definitely do something about it in the sense of like either cut him off or whatever. Alex keeps saying you need to tattle. And I agree with Alex. You do need to tell somebody if it is a romantic relationship. I don't think it's necessary to tattle on somebody if he is innocent and he is simply just trying to be a good friend and is just trying to be like, hey, how are you once in a while? And you're the one that's blowing it out of proportion. So that is my personal opinion, and as women we can be very emotional, so I would say reflect on your own emotions, reflect on your own situation, and realize that this is not it, right? And again, if he decides down the line by himself, completely by himself, unprompted, whatever, that the priesthood is not for him and he discerns out of it, then you could potentially, right, have a relationship. But I would not be sticking around for that. I would not be holding out hope for that. I would not be wasting my time with that. Okay. He has clearly chosen one path and you're going to have to choose yours, and those don't cross, right? But it'd be cool to have a friend in seminary. I have plenty of friends in seminary and I have plenty of priest friends. Um, but that is a relationship that cannot happen while he is in seminary, and it's not a relationship that you should be getting in between him and God. So you should cut it off. I do believe that's true. All right. So I just wanted to get that one out of the way because I was like, oh boy, that one was a little tricky. Okay, so now we can take questions. Somebody says, very well thought out reply, Amber. Yes, the young lady needs to step back and he needs to speak to a spiritual director in seminary and then pray about the vocation. Yes, 100%. I agree. Um, so, okay, let's see here. It's going to it's going to lag and then like a bunch of questions are going to come in at once, so please have patience with me as I try to as I try to navigate all of the questions. I'm also going to make my Instagram tab a little bit bigger so that I can actually read what you guys are saying because my eyesight's not the best. You can tell I'm tired because my eyes are slightly droopy and I have bags under my eyes because my body's trying to recover from my 5K. Okay, what do Catholic women look for in a man? Now, I've always said that what Catholic women look for in a man is St. Joseph. And I used to say that all the time. And my now husband, when he was watching my videos back in the day before we had even met, he watched that and was like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough. Like, how can I compete with St. Joseph? Like, he's a saint, like, he's this amazing man. He literally raised Jesus. And, cared for the mother of God and all of these things. And so it's like, how could I possibly complete? And I think a lot of guys get kind of wrapped up into that, right? They get into the idea that like they'll never be good enough, which is not true at all. And I think men sell themselves short a lot. I think one of the main things that I mean by Saint Joseph is a man who he has a lot of virtue, right? Saint Joseph does not speak one word in the entire Bible. But we know he probably did say some stuff or speak or teach Jesus, all of these things. Like we know that he did talk. It's not like he was mute, but that actions speak louder than words. And for Saint Joseph, his actions to provide and protect and have humility and to cultivate the virtues in such a beautiful way, that is what it means to be a man, right? To protect, to provide, not just physically, but also spiritually. And how do you show a woman that right before you're even dating her or before you marry her? Because sometimes it can be difficult to show a woman that without overstepping boundaries. And I think it just comes down to little things. If you're going on a date with a woman and you guys are walking together, walk on the side of the street that's, where the cars are. Be chivalrous, open the door for her, bring her flowers once in a while, not every single time. The woman doesn't need gifts like every single date out, right? But make her feel protected. Offer her your jacket if she's cold. Don't be like, well, I can't control the weather, Jackie, type of guy. If you guys remember that TV show, you guys are a real one. I never actually watched it. I just remember that clip. Anyway, and overall, just like make her feel safe. I think that's really important. Humility, especially intellectual humility. This is something my husband and I have talked about all the time, where there is a severe lack in intellectual humility in men. And I've actually talked about this with my good friend Joe. We're actually having a podcast about this later down. Actually, I think it's next week. We're having a podcast about, how to be a Catholic man, true masculinity, next week. But my thing always has been there has been a big issue of intellectual humility in men where men just want to be the smartest guy in the room. They can just rattle off a whole bunch of Catholic facts and they know a whole lot about Aquinas and church history, but there's no personality to them. There's no like, oh yeah, I like to hunt and fish and this and that. It's like they're not well-rounded. It's almost like they need to be the smartest person in the room and they have to constantly prove other men wrong, or there's like always a competition going on and they just always think that it's everything's a competition. And that was a huge turnoff for me and a lot of guys who were interested in me back when I was single, where I would try and talk to them about something and they'd be like, well, actually, and they treat me like a little girl. And I did not like that at all. I liked being provided for and I liked being protected, but I did not like being patronized. I did not like being like, "Oh, you poor little thing, like, oh, you're so sweet." That's that's BS, okay? I Any good woman would be insulted by that kind of behavior from a man. And I definitely think that as women, we also need to hold ourselves to a higher standard and also hold men to a higher standard. That's really important. But calling out intellectual humility and or pride, intellectual pride in men is something that I started kind of doing without realizing it. And I would be like, why do you feel the need to constantly like spit facts when I just asked you about like, this or that? Like, mainly because you could tell that it was some kind of flex for them, if that makes sense. And to me, it was just a giant turnoff. Pride in men was a giant turnoff for me. And it was something that I wasn't afraid to call out because men should have humility, right? I mean, women should too, but again, this is specifically about men. And I mainly saw it in the men. I saw women more struggle with vanity than pride, which is a type of pride, I guess you could say. But when I saw a prideful man, it was just such an ick. Such an ick. And there are some guys that are just like pure bro dudes where, like I said, everything's a competition. They have to be the smartest guy in the room. They can't just be a good sport about things. If I don't know how to explain that, but the girls who have seen it and have experienced it like I have know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's just very, very interesting to see. So I would say someone so what Catholic women look for are someone like Saint Joseph, someone who knows when to speak and when not to. Somebody who doesn't try to egg people on or try to be the smartest guy in the room, who's confident in himself enough to know that he doesn't have to feed into these, egg-ons by these other guys, right? He doesn't have to pretend to be somebody he's not. He's not wearing a mask 24/7. And I just think that that's something women are very attracted to. Obviously, Julian, not all men are like that. Obviously, but I am specifically talking about the men who are. So therefore, the men who are like that are like that. People know that there aren't all men are like that. However, I will say that a majority of men tend to get sucked into this because of men groups and because all men are kind of competing for a woman's attention or they're competing against each other because they're insecure. And it's just not attractive for women when we see um the guys acting like just complete idiots, like goofballs and stuff. That's one thing if it's an appropriate situation and stuff like that. But I have been in groups where guys were literally playing tag in the sacristy of a church because one of the guys was like, I dare you to play tag. He's just like, nah, man, no, I can't. Like, that's weird. And then he's like, well, I double dog dare you. And then they're chasing each other around in the sacristy. These are men who are older than me. And I was like, this is the most pitiful thing I have ever seen in my life. So, my thing is, don't play tag in a sacristy in general. That's extremely disrespectful and go to confession. But also, it's just confidence, right? Confidence, charisma, I think is really important too. Just having the confidence in yourself to be able to not need outside um oh my gosh, what is it? Like just outside affirmation. Like you should be able to know who you are. You should be able to know your hobbies, and you should have hobbies outside of the church, and you should have hobbies outside of working out too. But yeah, my friend Joe Gerald, he does great work with Catholic guys who struggle in these areas. So if you guys want to check him out, you guys can check him out on Instagram, JOE_JARRELL_, or maybe it's just Joe Gerald_. You guys will find him. But yeah, so it's interesting. Oh, yes, so true. Um, Kenpo said, the challenge for guys is how to be aware if you are like that or not. Self awareness is a skill to practice. Yes. Self awareness is something I feel like women, not all women, but a good majority of women grow up being very self aware and aware of societal norms. Guys not so much. And I don't really know why that is. I don't know if there's been studies done on that. Like, I don't know. But I have definitely noticed that self-awareness is something that guys can lack for sure. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Okay, moving on. Uh yes, this sounds a lot like what I've been dealing with lately. I'm so sorry if that is something you're dealing with. Uh, not the vibe. Okay, next questions. Do you think Catholic men should be sacrificing to find careers that are more financially successful? Um, honestly, it depends. I honestly think it depends. It depends on if you can go for a higher degree. I think a lot of times that just comes with time and working your way up the ladder, the corporate ladder as a man. Other times you might have a hobby that you want to pursue full time as something that you want to turn into a career, but it's really just meant to be a hobby, and God will let you know that by opening certain doors and closing others. I know my father, he wanted to become a mechanic or a carpenter when he was in college. He was pursuing that, but it was a very competitive field and he couldn't get an apprenticeship for carpentry. And then when he was doing mechanic stuff, when the winter came around and he had to touch cold metal tools and everything, he was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And so he ended up going to college to become a electrical engineer, mechanical electrical engineer, and he worked in power plants for over 30 years. Um, so for him, it made sense, right? Because obviously, for him, those two things, while they were hobbies, and he built a beautiful grandfather clock. He just built so many things, and he was very good with his hands. He built our downstairs room, like with the drywall, and I helped. He built the attic. Um, I just think that uh it really just depends on your situation and what job you have, right? Because if you're working in fast food or something like that, well, obviously you should try to get something a little bit better than that, especially if you plan on having a family one day, or at least working up to a management position where you get paid a little bit more. But when it comes to other jobs, if it's like, I don't know, State Farm. Are you Jake from State Farm? If it's like a State Farm job or something, again, there's room to grow in that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with pursuing a better job or a higher degree or education. I would just say it depends on what God wants for you, and yeah, that's kind of everybody's a little bit different. Let's see. Oh, hello. I am doing well. Thank you, Anna. I'm doing well. Um, Working on a roof all summer made me really appreciate Jesus and Joseph during carpentry. That's valid. That is valid. Okay, let's go over here. I said that like a valley girl. Have you guys seen like those videos on Instagram where they talk about the slang back in like the 80s or something? And one of them was like bag your face and stuff. Like, I just think that's so funny. Oh, it's so funny. Um, okay. Let's come on. My mouse is really dumb. Do, 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 do. Okay. Oop. Sorry, a whole bunch just came in on both sides. Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay, there we go. Okay. Um, we'll go to Instagram for now. I always hear Catholic speakers talk about being friends first, but also letting your intentions be known. Do you think the friendship can be formed through dates? What's your opinion? Yeah, I definitely think being friends is important first. Not every woman is like that, so you kind of have to feel that out, but getting to know a woman in a group setting is usually a lot better, or at least like a double date or like being set up by a friend, like is a lot better than just cold asking someone on a date. Mainly because if you're friends, first, she can get to know you a little bit more to decide whether or not you guys are compatible, right? And vice versa. Then you can decide too. Men are usually physically attracted first, and while physical attraction is important, usually personality is the most important thing for them, which is why I say get to know them on a friend level first, because then they get to know your personality, especially if maybe they're not physically attracted to you in the beginning. Because certain women think they have a certain type in their head and they're like, oh, I want him to be 6'5" and like he has to have rock hard abs and long Bieber hair. And it's like, eventually they end up with somebody who doesn't look like that at all, because first of all, that's not realistic, but also they realize that they actually fall in love with the person's personality as opposed to their looks. So that's why I always suggest being friends with somebody first, personally. When it does come to that, I do think friendship can blossom over a date if you go into the date without any expectations and you make that clear. I think the first, second, and third date, you should go into that without expectations. After the third date, there should be some maybe expectation of being boyfriend girlfriend, at least talking about that, um, that type of thing. The first and second date, the third date is like, I feel like you should know by the third date, but it's not always super clear. But the first date, no expectations, right? We're not boyfriend girlfriend. We're going to go get coffee, we're going to go get ice cream, we're going to have a picnic, we're going to go see a movie. Well, maybe not a movie because then you can't really talk and get to know each other. But you guys should plan something small. And then the second date, right? It should also be small again. Maybe go to a diner for breakfast, maybe go to a zoo or a museum or an art institute, something like that. And then by the third date, you guys should go on a date and maybe figure out if this is worth pursuing more, if this is something that um, isn't, you're not interested in anymore, that kind of thing. But you could definitely get to know somebody through dating them. But until it becomes official, like boyfriend, girlfriend, there shouldn't be any expectations of dating that person like long term officially. I also think it can be really confusing for guys to be friends first, because for men, they're very object focused, right? So they're like, well, if I like this girl and I feel a certain way about her, why can't I just go for it? Understood, understand, but also women think differently than men, right? So you also have to take into account how the woman is interpreting this. I've had a lot of guys, okay, not a lot. That sounds really stupid. I've had 3 guys cold ask me on a date, and each one I turned down because, first of all, safety. I had no idea who they were. They didn't know anyone I knew, and it felt very demanded, like they expected me to say yes. And I was not into that at all. And then later on down the line, I started becoming more friendly with them and friends in general. I still wasn't interested in dating them, but we became more like friends, and I was able to kind of tell them like, hey, when you approach a woman like that, it kind of gives her the creeps a little bit, just because it's so sudden, she doesn't know you, etc. Like maybe you've been observing her from a distance, but she's never noticed you because you never actually talked to her until just now when you decided in your mind to go out and ask her. And she's a little bit taken aback by it because it's a little bit weird. um and I just think that that's something that yeah, that's something that people, or guys, don't always think about, right? Think of it from the woman's perspective. And guys don't always have to do that because, it's they're not women, so like why would they do that? But I definitely think as a guy, when you ask your friend out on a date and she says yes, it is still a bit disorienting. All right, well, that's fair, Clay. I think in general, asking people out on a date, there's a risk there. I think it's a little bit disorienting no matter what for guys, because it takes a level of like um just vulnerability where you have to put yourself out there, and then it's like, oh, this person knows that I like her. And it's different, right? So yeah, I guess it just really depends on the person. If you do know them and you've known them for a little while, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking them out on a date. If you've just been observing her, you've never spoken to her before, and you're just like, I want to go on a date with this woman, get to know her a little bit first. I don't really think there are many guys on here watching this or that will watch this that are like that, where they're just going to like cold out ask a girl, but they might know a friend who would, or they might know a girl who was cold asked out and it freaked them out. Like, it's a universal experience. So Yeah, it's very interesting. I will also say that if you do become friends with a girl and you really like her and everything, the whole expectations thing, let's come back to the expectations thing. If after the third date she decides that she's not interested in you and that this just isn't going to work out, you have to respect that and also respect the fact that there's probably not going to be a friendship after that. And that can be very difficult to think about because you're like, oh, well, I just got to know this girl really, really well. But when there's emotional and romantic feelings there and it's one sided, it's not something that's just going to go away, and it can become very awkward for the woman if she knows you're still interested in her and you guys are still friends, because then she's going to feel like she can't go off and date other people. And when, like, ladies, that's a whole other issue we have to deal with, where we literally just need to cut it off and be like, no, this isn't going to work out. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you taking me on these dates, but it's just I'm not feeling it, right? And leaving it at that and not being like, "Oh, but we could still be friends." No. No, 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 no. No. No, no, no. No. Stop it. And guys, you guys have to also be strong enough to be like, "Okay, well, I really respect you being honest with me. Thank you." And whatever. No matter how you feel, no matter if you feel like you want to cry, scream, throw up, whatever, you have to be cordial and push those emotions down in the moment and just be like, well, is there anything better I can do in the future? And ladies, again, this is a reciprocal thing. Ladies, you have to be honest with the guy. Men, mean what you say and say what you mean. Clay, we talk about this all the freaking time. Um, and be honest with each other and be able to accept honesty and be able to accept criticism on both ends. On both ends. So that was really long and winded. Anyways, moving on. Hopefully that helped. I don't know if it did. But yeah. Ugh. Okay. How do you feel about getting into a relationship with a spirit filled Catholic and a spirit filled non denominational born again Christian? Oh boy. I always get canceled for my takes on these. Um, it depends. Okay. And I'll tell you why it depends. I get blasted for this all the freaking time. And so I am prepared. I am prepared for the backlash that this is going to cause. So I think that if you are a man pursuing a non Catholic woman, it's okay. And I'll tell you why. Because naturally, women want to submit to a good man, right? And so eventually that woman will probably convert one day because of her man's example. If he is strong in the faith, if he knows what he wants, and this is a good, virtuous woman, she's not crazy blue haired liberal, she's not like on birth control, she's not, you know, pro abortion, she's not any of that. She's a virtuous woman, and there can be virtuous Protestants, you know? She's a virtuous woman. She's not anti Catholic. She doesn't hate the church. She respects your faith. And she wants to raise the kids Catholic because that you have to agree to that to be married in the Catholic Church, right? If all of those boxes are checked, I don't see why you can't pursue it, because a woman who is full of virtue will eventually come to truth if she is seeking truth through the man she follows. And I think that's really important. If the roles are switched, it's a lot trickier. If the woman is Catholic and the man is not Catholic, it's more likely that the woman will leave her faith, take it less seriously, or no longer follow certain cultural faith norms to appease her husband or to appease her boyfriend. Because naturally, women want to submit to men. I don't care what ladies want to say. They can say, no, I'm an independent boss woman. No, women want to submit to men. Okay, it's written on us, it's written on our hearts. God literally put that on us. We want to submit to men. We want to follow men. We want to be protected by men. We want to be provided for by men. And in order to do that, you know, he can't love you properly unless he's Catholic. And there are some guys who are interested in the faith and are very supportive of the faith. They'll go to mass, they'll raise the kids Catholic and everything like that. But if the man isn't Catholic, what is it? 70% of kids fall away from the faith if the dad's not Catholic. There was like this whole thing, this whole statistic done. And for me, that's a big amount. If the dad is not a practicing Catholic, then the women fall away. And Alex makes a good point. He says women crave structure that men give them. And it's true. But that structure comes from the Catholic Church, right? Our lives are based around Catholic teaching. And if the woman has to enforce that, that's exhausting. That's exhausting on the woman. That's not something that we should have to do. The man should be able to take the lead and lead the woman and lead them in the faith. And I think that that is something that a lot of women don't think about when they get into those relationships with non-Catholic men, is that they don't realize they're going to become the sole provider of the faith eventually. Because if the men are not already, and granted, when you do get married and stuff like that, you could marry a Catholic guy and he becomes lukewarm. Like there are a bunch of different situations where it just doesn't, it's just not the great. It's just not great, right? But in my experience, and from talking to a whole bunch of married Catholics and married people who are married to non-Catholics, guys and girls, the number one thing that the people who married the non-Catholics will say is, "I wish my spouse was Catholic. I converted or I reverted after we got married and I didn't realize the importance at the time, and they're strictly anti-Catholic or they just don't care, they're lukewarm, this or that, and it's taking a toll on our marriage." On the other spectrum, the people who were married in the Catholic faith are in it through thick and thin. Now, of course, there's always going to be little, exceptions, caveats, whatever. But for the most part, when I have talked to Catholic couples, that seems to be the consensus. And um it takes a toll, especially on the women. I've noticed that when the men marry non-Catholic women, it's not that bad. They say that eventually their wife either is becoming more interested in the church or she converted, but unfortunately, there have been cases where the man converted and wanted his whole family to convert and was trying to lead his family into the church, and the wife ended up divorcing him because of it. So there are a whole bunch of different situations and a whole bunch of different things that can happen. Um, but yeah, it can be very tricky. And so in general though, I just don't suggest it completely. Um Again, I think if you're a guy and there is a virtuous Protestant woman and she has the virtues and everything, I don't see an issue pursuing that, but for women it's a lot different because women are not meant to lead in that way. And putting that on a woman to lead in that way, eventually we burn out. Eventually we give up, and either we give up our faith or our marriage crumbles, right? And that's not okay. I was in a relationship like that and I realized the dangers of it. So I got out of it, despite the fact that I had been on and off with this person for years. And I was like, oh, well, maybe this time, maybe this time. And each time he promised and he never delivered. And so because of that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to be the big person here and realize that I need to be led. I cannot lead. And I broke it off. And now I'm married to a very devout Catholic man who leads and helps me become a better Catholic. And it's something that I didn't realize I needed, and it feeds my soul. So, don't know where I was going with that, but be very careful. In other words, I would say just be very careful. Um, so yeah, okay. Ooh, I need glasses. Hang on. Okay. Oh, sorry guys. Hang on. Okay. Sorry, it's just like there's like so much coming in that I'm trying to scroll through them before they all disappear at the top. Okay. How do you know if your partner is the right one to be with religiously or if you should leave? I've been in a 2-year relationship and only have started thinking this since September. Um I don't really know what you mean, Eric. Do you mean like religiously? Like are you guys different religions, or is it because if you guys are different religions, I mean, again, the odds of that working out is going to be really difficult, right? Dating and then marrying somebody of a different religion completely, like not even Christian, has a lot of issues that I have seen. I've seen people marry Muslims. I've seen Catholics marry Buddhists I've seen, and every single time they said they never in a million years would have thought that marriage would have been this difficult because of the religious differences. Well, if you guys are both Catholic, Eric, I don't really understand your question. Could you clarify a little bit better? Just as to what you mean by, you guys have been into your relationship type of thing. What do you mean? I guess is what I'm asking. Um because if you're saying like, oh, you guys have been in a relationship for too long, um because I do believe that you should know whether or not you want to marry somebody by the 6 month of dating mark, and then maybe a year to plan the wedding type of thing. If you cannot decide whether or not you're compatible with someone for marriage after 6 months, um you should probably shouldn't be dating them anymore, because or you guys haven't done the heavy hitting questions and stuff about politics, abortion, vaccines, homeschooling, all of those big, heavy topics that tend to um, destroy or rile up relationships. Um, you guys should probably talk about those if you haven't, but I'm not exactly sure what you mean. Um, and also, I have to scroll down because sometimes it doesn't completely. There we go. I'll wait for you to respond, Eric, really quick, and then I will quickly. My daughters 7 and 12 are going through CCD. What advice do you have for them? Um, I mean, I don't know if my advice is necessarily for them, let alone for you, really, because you're the parent, right? But being in the domestic church is really important, and being able to talk with them about the faith is really important. I would say for them specifically, if there's a saint they're interested in, to do a lot of research on them, ask them for their intercession, and then maybe do a project with them, like setting up their own little prayer corner that they can use and stuff. Um, yeah, I would say those are really good. But yeah, okay. Eric said you haven't compromised recently. I'm still not completely understanding what you mean, Eric, so I'm gonna move on. But I'll pray for you, and I hope that it does work out. Seems like I can't connect neither with very traditional Catholics nor with more liberal guys. Is it my problem or what? No, honestly, I'm too sometimes I'm too trad for the Novus Ordos, and sometimes I'm too liberal for the trads. So I would say though, it's not a you problem, it's a balance problem. People are divided so much these days on one side of the spectrum or the other that they can't see anything except for their own side. Now, for me personally, I go to a Latin Novus Ordo, I go to a Novus Ordo, I go to the Latin Mass, I go to English Novus Ordo. I've gone to all of them. I've gone to a Maronite Mass, I've gone to a Byzantine liturgy. So I I have been a part of a bunch of different liturgies. I think they're all beautiful. I think they're all, valid. When it comes down to it, though, I don't exactly know the issues you're running into each one. I'm assuming with the more traditional side of things, you're running into issues with the men being a little bit too overbearing, maybe a little too controlling. And on the other side of things, men are too loosey goosey. Men don't really take their faith seriously, and it's kind of all for show as opposed to actually being serious. That tends to be the differences, right? Between the two that I have seen at least. Um, but for me personally, I don't know. I don't think it's a you problem. I definitely think there are guys out there who have a good balance of their faith. They're just a little trickier to find because sometimes they're not in those groups, right? If you go to a youth group or something, a lot of the times, or not youth group, but like young adult group, right? A lot of the times those guys are too busy working on themselves, their faith, you know, uh, jobs, just doing other hobbies and stuff to go to those types of groups. So it might be a little bit harder to find them personally. Um, I was able to find my husband at a youth group because he was new convert. He was going to just check it out. His brother came with him. His godfather was kind of a part of that group too. My best friend was a part of that group. And so she dragged me kicking and screaming. And then I met Max and I was just like, ooh la la. So there are certain situations that come to mind where it's like, okay, maybe you're being a little bit too like not that your standards are too high, but maybe there's like nitpicky things that you need to work on. I don't know what that would be. But I would say write out a list of pros and cons. I would say what are some things that you want in a man and what are some things you do not want in a man. And then when you meet guys from either side of the spectrum, kind of figure out where those people fall into those pros and cons because there are some things that you might be able to compromise on, but there are other things that you might not be able to compromise on. So I definitely think it just depends on what you need. But the pros and cons list has helped a lot of girls I know. So maybe try that and see where that leads you. But I'm going to take one more question because then we're reaching about the hour mark and I do have to do some more stuff. But I'm going to ask one more or do one more. Okay. Francis asks, is it normal to develop a crush in another person while in a relationship? Isn't that a sign that the commitment of the one who crushed is weak? So if you okay, so I think Francis, what you mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that let's say two people are in a relationship, one person in that relationship crushes on a person who's not in the relationship, right? A different person. Um, and that is like that's what you mean, right? In that case, if another person has a crush on somebody who is not the person they're dating, that relationship needs to end. Because if you're dating somebody and you get a crush on somebody else, you're not fully committed to that person. You're not fully attached to that person. You don't see a future with that person. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having a crush on somebody else, right? I think when that happens, depending on who it is. I don't know this if this is you, Francis, or if this is somebody you know or whatever. But if the person who has a crush on another person does not end the relationship that they are in, the other person needs to end it and realize that they're better than this. And in a way, actually, this is cheating. I mean, in certain sense. I mean, if you are crushing on a person who is not the person you're dating, like that's like one step away from actually physically cheating. And you don't have to physically cheat in order to cheat, right? It could be also mental. Um, and I think there are differences. Like, I've had friend crushes before. I call them friend crushes because like I just want to be their friend so bad because they're just such amazing people. And I had that with Chloe. Now keep in mind I've only had this with women where it's just like, oh, I just want to be their friend, you know? And so I've had that with a lot of women. Um and for me, friend crushes are completely different. But yeah, no, Francis, you did the right thing. Francis said, I ended it a month ago. I have residual doubts, but you gave light. God bless. Yes, you are so welcome. God bless you. I know that it's tough, but trust me, not worth it. And it's kind of just somebody who has a crush on somebody outside of the relationship and is bold enough to tell the other person about it, but then not end the relationship to pursue the other crush or whatever it might be. Um, that's like I can't specifically speak, but it does give cheater vibes, right? Like potentially they would cheat on you if they're not willing to end the relationship and acknowledge the fact that they are not emotionally still invested, physically still invested, like that type of thing. If they let their emotions run rampant so much that they can form another crush on a person, that's like a romantic crush. Who knows what else they would do if they can't keep that in check? You know what I mean? Um so yeah, it's interesting. But with all of that being said, guys, I'm sorry, that's all I have time for today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will talk to you guys next time.